In 1985, a film quietly arrived in theaters that would echo through generations. Not with explosions or spectacle, but with heart, precision, and a time machine built from a DeLorean. Before the crowds, before the legacy, it was just an idea passed between two writers, overlooked by more than 40 studios. They didn't see it then. Maybe they weren't supposed to. The tone was too light for the era's grit, too sincere for its sarcasm. But something lingered beneath its polished surface, a kind of emotional gravity that only a few could feel early on. Behind the casting changes and long night shoots was a team that refused to compromise the soul of their story. Their vision wasn't loud. It was persistent. And as the pieces slowly aligned, from the right actor to the right moment, the quiet became a roar. The road there wasn't smooth. Scenes had to be res-hot. Careers were risked. But something in the struggle gave the film its weight. What we remember now wasn't guaranteed. It was carved out of resistance, out of a belief that this odd little story about time, family, and identity might actually matter. And when it finally found its place, something clicked, not just on screen, but in the people watching. Even now, decades later, the ripple is still moving. A young skateboarder with a Walkman. An eccentric scientist with wild eyes. A car that defied time. They're symbols now, etched into pop culture. But once, they were just pages in a script almost no one wanted. The imperfections stayed in. The bloopers became part of the charm. Mistakes didn't ruin it, they humanized it. And maybe that's what made it last. The story didn't just travel through time, it aged with it. Not every line is remembered, but the feeling is. And beneath the polished legacy lies the raw, unpredictable rhythm of creativity under pressure. Some roles changed hands. Some scenes were rewritten. But the core, its warmth, its curiosity, remained untouched. The details, even the flawed ones, formed something permanent. It wasn't trying to be iconic. It just was. And that might be why it still lingers, quietly, powerfully, just waiting to be revisited. It began with a script, born in 1980 and passed from studio to studio, each one turning it away. More than 40 rejections came and went, as the industry leaned into darker, edgier comedy. But this story didn't fit the mold. It wasn't cynical. It didn't chase shock value. It was built on connection, on nostalgia, adventure, and the delicate tension of cause and effect. When Universal Pictures finally said yes, it wasn't just a win for the filmmakers, it was a lifeline for the project itself. Still, nothing came easy. Casting the right Marty McFly became a battle of timing and instinct. Michael J. Fox was the first choice, but his commitments to television made him unavailable. So, production moved forward with Eric Stoltz. Scenes were filmed. Weeks were spent. But something didn't land. The tone felt off. The chemistry wasn't there. And the hard decision was made. Start over. The scenes were scrapped. The costs climbed. But when Fox finally stepped in, the shift was immediate. The pieces clicked. And the film began to find its voice. That voice stretched beyond the camera lens. It took shape in performances that required not just acting, but transformation. Michael J. Fox didn't just play Marty, he became him. From skateboarding to guitar, horseback riding to handling firearms, he immersed himself in the role. That commitment gave weight to the charm, making the fantasy feel rooted in something real. Around him, the cast rose to the same level. Christopher Lloyd's Doc Brown blended eccentricity with warmth. Thomas F. Wilson took on the demanding layers of Biff, even learning lassoing for the third installment. These weren't just characters, they were evolving arcs, shaped by actors willing to stretch themselves. But even as the cast gave everything on screen, tensions brewed behind it. Crispin Glover, whose portrayal of George McFly helped define the first film, didn't return for the sequels. Disagreements over creative control and pay drove a wedge, and his absence sparked a controversial solution. The filmmakers used prosthetics and a body double to recreate his likeness without his consent. It worked visually, but it fractured the trust behind the curtain. What followed set off more than a subplot. Glover's legal challenge would go on to reshape how Hollywood treats likeness and image, a topic that continues to unfold in today's digital landscape. But the production pushed forward, even as pressure mounted. Technical challenges became the next frontier. To bring multiple versions of Marty to life in a single frame, director Robert Zemeckis and the team at Industrial Light and Magic developed the VistaGlide system, a robotic camera rig that revolutionized visual effects. With it, scenes became seamless, layered, and alive with motion. Yet even with innovation at its peak, imperfections slipped through. Continuity errors appeared. Lighting changed mid-shot. Background extras repeated movements. A video recording referenced dialogue that had never been filmed. These weren't careless mistakes. They were reminders of how fast and relentlessly the production had to move. And strangely, those moments made it feel more human. They gave fans something to discover on every rewatch, small fingerprints of a crew racing against time. The evolution of the trilogy mirrored the complexity of time travel itself. Interwoven, sometimes messy, but always forward-moving. Original plans for Part 2 aimed for the late 1960s, but the vision shifted, drawing audiences back into the familiar world of the 1950s. It was a return that layered memory upon memory, folding old scenes into new perspectives. Part 3 would take an even bolder turn, leaving behind suburban America for the dusty expanse of the Old West. The genre shift was risky, but it added depth, anchoring the story in another era of reinvention. Thematically, the series began to explore more than timelines. It looked inward. Relationships evolved. Doc Brown, once a figure of scientific obsession, found love and emotional grounding. His first on-screen kiss, during the third film, marked a quiet but powerful moment of growth. The trilogy didn't just jump through decades. It matured with each entry. And underneath the plot twists and set pieces was something quieter, something lasting. A commitment to telling a story that never stood still, even when it looked backward. The deeper the trilogy traveled into its own mythology, the more complicated and fragile its structure became. Continuity began to bend under the weight of layered timelines and evolving character arcs. The DeLorean's power source, once a clear plot device, shifted between versions, leaving attentive fans piecing together the logic. What had started as a clean setup now required recalibration. And yet, within that complexity, a strange beauty emerged. The story refused to settle. It moved, like time itself, through missteps and improvisation. Prop inconsistencies appeared, the same flyer shown in multiple conditions, handwriting that shifted from scene to scene. But the pace never slowed. Instead, the imperfections added a kind of heartbeat. Every frame carried both control and chaos. Even the trilogy's grounding science strained under scrutiny. Plutonium's fictional appearance, the misdated birth of Jesus Christ, and the impossible leap to the Middle East, these weren't just plot holes. They were fragments of a creative machine running at full speed, choosing momentum over precision. And for all their flaws, these pieces held charm. They belonged to a world where imagination outweighed literal accuracy. What mattered wasn't logic. It was emotion. And the film never lost its grip on that. That emotion reached beyond the scenes and into the production itself. On-set friction, once hidden from the public eye, began to surface in subtle, undeniable ways. Crispin Glover's departure remained a wound that didn't fully heal. His legal battle over the use of his likeness in Part 2 opened doors no one had walked through before. The use of prosthetics and a stand-in actor without his permission triggered a reckoning within the industry. Suddenly, the boundary between character and person was no longer secure. Filmmaking became a legal and ethical minefield. It was no longer just about telling the story. It was about who owned the face telling it. That singular decision, meant to patch a hole in the cast, rippled into future decades, laying the groundwork for a conversation that continues in today's world of AI and digital doubles. But even as the courtroom drama loomed over the sequel, the team pressed on. There wasn't time to dwell. Each production schedule was tight. Every moment behind the scenes demanded clarity under pressure. The tension, though rarely visible on screen, colored the atmosphere of those final chapters. And still, the emotional spine remained unbroken. The cast carried the weight of the past while reaching for something new. In the third film, that reaching found a quieter, more personal note. The setting shifted to the Wild West, not just for style, but for substance. Stripped of futuristic technology and layered timelines, the story breathed differently. It slowed, leaned into character, and let emotions rise to the surface. For Doc Brown, it became a turning point. After years of playing the mentor, the scientist, the outsider, he became something else entirely. Human. His first on-screen kiss didn't just add romance. It rewrote the fabric of his character. Suddenly, there was vulnerability behind the genius. And for an actor like Christopher Lloyd, It meant stepping into emotional territory untouched by his earlier roles. The risk paid off. That softness balanced the trilogy's wild energy. Meanwhile, Thomas F. Wilson dove headfirst into a new version of Biff. This time, a gun-slinging brute in a world of dust and silence. He trained in horseback riding and lasso work, embodying a version of antagonism that echoed his earlier roles but spoke in a different voice. The old patterns evolved. The stakes weren't just plot-based anymore. They were personal. And in that evolution, the film found its final gear. One built not on spectacle, but transformation. What began as a nostalgic time travel adventure had, by this point, transformed into a reflection on identity, legacy, and consequence. The past was no longer just a setting. It was a mirror. And every choice made by the filmmakers, from the controversial to the groundbreaking, shaped how that reflection would be seen. The VistaGlide camera, designed to let multiple versions of Marty interact in a single shot, symbolized this new layer of complexity. It wasn't just a technical marvel. It was a metaphor. One person, split across timelines, across choices, across lives. And the camera captured it all without breaking the illusion. That was the quiet genius behind the production. Even when reality strained against the fantasy, the illusion held. And beneath every scene, every mistake left in, every frame reshot or reimagined, lived the truth of a team that chose to keep going. That decision, to move forward despite conflict, fatigue, and contradiction, became the trilogy's most honest thread. Not perfection. Not precision. But persistence. And in that persistence, the real story unfolded. A story about people chasing something that didn't exist yet, and somehow, creating it anyway. As the trilogy came to a close, its imperfections, struggles, and unplanned detours faded into the background, giving way to something deeper. The audience didn't just remember the flying cars or the lightning strikes. They remembered what it felt like to see time bend under the pressure of love, fear, and responsibility. Every character had been stretched and reshaped by the journey, and so had the people behind the scenes. The production's pace had left room for mistakes, but those mistakes became markers of effort, of human hands at work in something much bigger than any one frame. Continuity errors, background repetitions, or mismatched props didn't weaken the films. They reminded the world that even iconic stories are built under pressure, and that nothing perfect ever feels truly alive. The final film's quiet moments, Doc's emotional leap into a new future, Marty's decision to step away from conflict, reflected a team learning to close a story without losing what made it start. No loud finales. No crashing spectacle. Just resolution, slow and earned. It's easy to miss how much changed between the first script and the last scene. The cast didn't stay the same. The script didn't stay the same. Even the tone evolved, from playful to grounded, from light-hearted to quietly profound. Along the way, tensions emerged and lingered. Crispin Glover's absence never left the screen, even with the prosthetics that tried to fill the space. Legal echoes of that decision shaped the industry's understanding of ownership and likeness, forcing filmmakers to face uncomfortable truths. Yet despite the noise beyond the camera, the story kept moving forward. Production choices that could have derailed momentum instead reshaped it. Even as the DeLorean's mechanics lost internal logic, even as timelines frayed under closer inspection, the emotional core held. The heart of the story, choice, consequence, connection, stayed intact. In the end, that was what carried the weight. It wasn't just a trilogy about time travel. It was a trilogy about how people change when they try to fix the past. And what they find instead. Over time, the flaws became part of the memory. Fans embraced them, not in spite of what they revealed, but because of what they proved, that even classics are built with uncertainty, with imperfection, with last-minute pivots and impossible deadlines. The flyers with mismatched text. The altered handwriting. The lighting that shifted when it shouldn't have. These moments were never distractions. They were evidence. Of long nights. Of choices made in pressure. Of passion that outran perfection. And when viewers returned to these scenes, year after year, they didn't just rewatch, they remembered. Not just the moments on screen but the story behind it. The quiet risks. The unexpected turns. The lessons hiding in every retake and rewrite. And somewhere in that mix of spectacle and strain, something rare took shape. A story that could have fallen apart, but didn't. A film that could have been forgotten, but wasn't. That chapter may be over, but it shaped everything that came after. The trilogy's cultural impact didn't fade with time. It grew. Preserved by the U.S. Library of Congress, grossing over $381 million worldwide, and etched into the language of cinema, its legacy became a part of history. Not just for what it did right, but for how it endured through what it didn't. Every recasting, every legal fight, every shifted plot thread added weight to the whole. The dialogue remained quoted. The characters remained familiar. And even as the world changed, the story stayed close. It taught something simple: that a film doesn't need to be flawless to be unforgettable. That the marks left behind aren't stains, they're proof of how much it mattered. And in that proof, Back to the Future became more than a movie. It became a memory passed down, revisited, and retold. A reminder that the best stories never stay still. They move with time. Just like we do.